of the delivery of primary care in this province, and we're developing the necessary documentation and regulations to be able to do that. Mr. Speaker, I anticipate that the legislature in the near future will have an opportunity to discuss this even further with respect to putting in place that which the honourable member is requesting.
Honourable member for Glace Bay, and your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, there's another report on the minister's desk that's collecting dust that's called the Primary Health Care Renewal in Nova Scotia, Action for Healthier Nova Scotians. And on page 25 of that report, it states that there are regulatory and licensing options that would support the introduction of midwives in Nova Scotia without any legislation. So, Mr. Speaker, my question to the minister is, given the immediate obstetric challenges in this province, why hasn't the minister acted on that recommendation to provide a regulatory licensing regime for midwives that would avoid the time-consuming process of drafting legislation?
Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, the issue of the delivery and the reform of primary health care involves not only the need to address, by way of legislation and regulation, the issue of midwifery, but there is a whole range of services that are out there that need to be addressed as we move forward with reform so that we can improve patient care in this province. That is the direction we're taking, Mr. Speaker, and we're going to deal with midwifery, we're going to deal with other facets of the reform of primary care, and as I indicated, Mr. Speaker, we had an extremely good meeting with the advocates of midwifery in this province. They seemed enthused with the direction we're taking, and Mr. Speaker, we will stay in touch with them, and I'm sure that we will be in a position to bring forward very significant reforms in the delivery of primary health care in the very near future.
Member for Dartmouth East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Residents of Northwest Cove on St. Margaret's Bay are against a fish farm development in Northwest Cove. Residents are concerned that the fish farm will destroy their local economy, their local fishery, their ecotourism industries, and threaten their environment. Just before the election, the Ham government promised to review the license it issued for a fish farm in Northwest Cove. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries. Has your government honoured that promise, and when can we expect your findings?
Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I know that we've been monitoring this issue quite closely. During the election campaign, the good member from Chester St. Margaret's had asked the minister at the time to conduct a review of the license agreement. So since taking office, I've been brought up to speed on the history of the status of the Horse Island Aquaculture project, including the approvals and the court processes, and I feel at this point that all things are being adhered to.
Dartmouth East on your first supplementary.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, but unfortunately the residents are still waiting for the honourable member from Chester St. Margaret's and this government to act on their promised review. A fish farm of this size and scope, which is proposed by the company involved, will destroy much of the Northwest Cove. 90% of these residents oppose this operation. They've been fighting this fish farm for 4 years. Forcing a fish farm on a community is not the right thing to do. Mr. Speaker, my question to the Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries is, what will it take for you to cancel this license once and for all?
Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At this point, from the processes that have been followed in order to award this contract, the process is a good process. It was one that was followed and adhered to. There are a number of conditions involved in that, and when the company decides to set up shop, we will be monitoring that continually. Thank you very much, Mr.
Member
Speaker.
for Dartmouth East on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, when this government was in the mood to make promises, they promised the residents. They promised the residents of Northwest Cove that they would review the fish farm license, threatening their community. It's been months, and residents have heard nothing. Mr. Speaker, my question to the minister is, when will the minister provide the residents of this community with the detailed update that they deserve and that they're looking for?
The Honourable Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries have about 10 seconds.
I've communicated to the member, I've communicated to the community of what the process will be, and I look forward to adhering to that.
Order, please. Time allotted for question period has expired. Opposition members' business. The honourable member for Cole Harbour Eastern Passage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can you please call Bill number 3?
Bill number 3, Homes for Official Care Act. The honourable leader of the official opposition.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's with some pleasure I rise today to speak with respect to this bill. As the Speaker knows and as the members of government know, this is a bill that would ensure that the residents of nursing homes or homes for the aged or disabled are not billed for health care costs and requires that a per diem charge for room and board are based on the ability of the residents to pay those costs from income, Mr. Speaker. Now, I want to do, if I may, just a very brief review for the members of government and for the members of the opposition of why this bill came to the House of Assembly and why it is we introduced it again at the beginning of this session. Mr. Speaker, a little over a year ago, the members of the NDP caucus undertook a wide-ranging review of long-term care policy, a campaign that was designed to raise the awareness of the people of Nova Scotia of what was going on in long-term care. And for most people in this province, what was found and the information that came forward was absolutely startling. Because what we revealed over the course of some months, Mr. Speaker, was a system which was put in place by the Liberal Party that was designed to strip seniors of everything that they had worked their lives for in order to pay for health care that in any other circumstance would have been part of the publicly funded Medicare system. And the excuse that was used, Mr. Speaker, was that the system, the Canada Health Act only provided for payment of medical costs in certain specified establishments such as hospitals, Mr. Speaker, and because long-term care facilities were not hospitals, the cost of that medical care could be passed directly on to the patients. Now, I know that the Liberals will stand up at some point in time and they will say that that somehow this was actually attributable to the Tories back in the 1980s at some point in time. And, you know, Mr. Speaker, it is nonsense. The Liberals were there from 1993 to 1998 and could have changed the system any time they wanted, but decided that they would not. And they decided that they would, over that period of time, take from the seniors of our society as much as they could reasonably get away with taking in order to pay for health care that everyone else received as part of the publicly funded Medicare system. And I also know, Mr. Speaker, and I just want to deal with this and get it out of the way, I also know that Liberals at some point in time will stand up and say, well, gee, you know, if we only had $147 million more or something like that, you know, we could pay for these. Well, Mr. Speaker, there are certain realities about this claim that they make over and over again. I think it's appropriate to address them. You know, first of all, they like to claim that we supported the tax cut that the Tories put forward. And you know and we know that this is fundamentally untrue. In fact, we voted against the budget that contained the tax cut, and we voted against the $155 checks that went out to everyone. And the other fabrication that the Liberals like to heap on people is that there is actually a tax cut to begin with, because this is fundamentally false. The reality is that the tax burden that is being shouldered by the people of Nova Scotia every single day is greater now than it was when the government came to power. Greater now than it was when the government came to power. So there in effect has been no tax cut. They know that, and we know it. And I think it's passing ironic, Mr. Speaker, that for years they claimed that the NDP only wanted to tax and spend and tax and spend, and now they turn around and try to criticize us for not wanting to tax because they want to tax. So this is an irony that is in the debate that the Liberals put out. But you know something, Mr. Speaker, they ran a campaign on that.
Order, please. The honourable leader of the official opposition has the floor.
They ran a campaign on that, and the reality is that the people of Nova Scotia understood that this was not the case and that what they were saying was not a fact. And that, I suppose, Mr. Speaker, explains the relative standings of the parties in the House, although I'm still at a loss to understand why there seem to be so many of you over there. Mr. Speaker, the reality, Mr. Speaker, is that this is an opportunity for us, and we're entering now into a phase of the debate around this issue that is a very important one, because here we are in November proceeding into a budget year. We're almost in November, proceeding a budget year. And the opportunity is coming very quickly for the government to make choices about the next budget. And one of the choices that the members of the government can make, and one of the choices that the members of cabinet can make, is to ensure that this particular issue is resolved once and for all. That seniors who are find that it is necessary for them for whatever reason, or those who through no fault of their own end up in need of long-term care, aren't subjected to the injustice, the indignity, and the disrespect of a system that will take away everything that they have worked their entire lifetimes for in order to be able to pay for a basic health care service. Mr. Speaker, and we're not talking here about questionable medical services. We're talking about things that are absolutely, fundamentally an integral part of the healthcare system itself. We're talking about RNs. We're talking about intravenous, Mr. Speaker. We're talking about the most basic healthcare services. So here we are at what I consider to be the meat of the debate. The government has a minority government. They're looking for areas on which we can find agreement. And what do you know? This is one. Because the members on this side of the House, and I count among those the 15 members in my party and the 12 members of the Liberal Party who were elected on a platform that said that they would end the charging of seniors for long-term care. That's what we said, respectively. Now, what differed was we felt that that is something that should end immediately, forthwith, the day of the election. And the Liberals took the position that it should end with the first budget. Well, Mr. Speaker, the Liberals and the Conservatives are going to be put to the test when this budget comes forward, because this will be the first budget. And both of the parties on this side have said that is at the maximum. We had a different time frame, but they said at the maximum, the point in time when this should end. And here is going to be the opportunity to ensure that it does end. Should not misunderstand, Mr. Speaker. We have traveled the province from one end to the other. I met with caregivers. I met with administrators from long-term care facilities. I met, obviously, with the families of people who were in long-term care facilities. And all of them universally provided me with example after example of the kind of dismay that they felt around their way that their loved ones, their patients, were being treated in this system. So this is not a matter, and I think the government misunderstood this. The government felt that this was a narrow matter that affected only a small number of people. And they kept saying over and over and over again that 80% of the people in the long-term care sector are already covered by government. It's only 20%, and therefore they would come up with a number and say it's only a small number of people. Well, there were two things about that, Mr. Speaker, that were fundamentally untrue. First of all, everybody who went into the system, or almost everybody who went into the system, went in with something. They were, of course, very quickly stripped of whatever it was that they had, so they became dependent on government while they were in there. But in the meantime, they had whatever small asset base they earned over the lifetime taken from them. And secondly, Mr. Speaker, even the 20% that were still there were going through that agonizingly slow, well, maybe not so slow, agonizing process of having everything they own taken from them month after month after month after month. And their families sat there and watched this go on. And it was a terrible thing for them and their families. Now this year, Mr. Speaker, the government in the last budget year came forward and said we're going to make some changes. We're going to increase the amount of funding on a per diem basis. And this is going to make a big difference to all of the people out there. Well, unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, the evidence is very much to the contrary. As of July 31st, this government identified an additional $59 million that they intend to systematically strip from individuals who are unfortunate enough to find themselves in a long-term care facility. $59 million that the government is going to take from people, and I want you to think about this, Mr. Speaker. These are people who are helpless, who are lying in long-term care beds, who have sometimes no one to defend them. Mr. Speaker, these are people who are ill, who require medical treatment that under any other circumstances would be provided to them. I mean, there is, I can't imagine, a case of greater injustice, a case of greater disrespect for a group of people, after all, Mr. Speaker, who spent their lifetime defending this province, building this province, raising their children here, and as I've said before, Mr. Speaker, paying taxes every single day. Every single day. They paid tax revenue into this province because they felt that there was a contract between them and their government. And that contract said, Mr. Speaker, that when they were in need, when it came time for them to require basic health care services from their government was going to be there for them. Their government was going to make sure that they were looked after. And there was no asterisk on that. There was no caveat from the government. There was nothing explained to them that said, well, this may not be available if you happen to be unfortunate enough to go in a long-term care facility. That was never mentioned. People expected that they would receive basic health care services because, Mr. Speaker, because it was the right thing to do. That as part of a caring and compassionate society, we look after one another. We pay our money into the collective commonwealth, and in return for that, in return for being part of that process, we receive back the services we need when we are in need. Well, Mr. Speaker, unfortunately for many people, the brutal reality has been that when they needed government most, the government turned its back and walked away. The government decided that they would take everything that that person owned in order to pay for those services. Mr. Speaker, this year, $277,000 a day will be stripped out of the pockets of seniors. $277,000 a day. It's $11,500 an hour, or as I pointed out to the Premier, $192 every single minute that a person is in a long-term care facility. And this must end, Mr. Speaker. This must end, and it must end in the upcoming budget year. The government has it within its capacity to ensure that this comes to an end. It has it within its capacity to exercise the good judgment to ensure that it ends. Because I believe, Mr. Speaker, that the people of Nova Scotia expect no less. Because they watched over the course of an election campaign that was fought vigorously, a premier who said over and over again, I recognize that this injustice exists. I recognize that there is great hurt among the seniors population, and we are going to struggle to try and fix it as we can. Well, Mr. Speaker, we cannot engage in an unconscionable compromise. And that is why I have challenged the Liberals who ran on this same platform that they would end it in the first budget, and I challenged the government as part of its budget-making process to bring forward a budget in the spring that will, for once and for all, put an end to this unjust, disrespectful policy, and once and for all will fund long-term care properly. And thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Recognize the Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the Leader of the Opposition for providing this opportunity to discuss this subject, which is one that receives sympathy from all sides of the House, and it's one that all of us have addressed to in one form or another in our recent election platforms. Mr. Speaker, and reference was made by the Leader of the Opposition to that, and he spoke about some of his expectations based on what their approach has been. Now, Mr. Speaker, there is no question that this government, that covering these costs for seniors is the right thing to do, and that is why we have committed to do that and more by 2007. And I want to point out, Mr. Speaker, that is and it's been made very clear by, Mr. Speaker, if the honourable member wants to talk, he can get up. Otherwise, he can show me the courtesy of allowing me to participate in the debate. So, Mr. Speaker, nursing home care is not included under the Canada Health Act, and provinces do not receive funding to support nursing home care, and this has led to the patchwork approach that exists right across the country. And that, Mr. Speaker, is the reality of where this issue has come from. Nova Scotia has been leading a campaign to urge Ottawa to include home care and the medical costs in nursing homes as an insured medical services. That, Mr. Speaker, is an extremely important approach. And if the federal government were to recognize their role in this regard, then obviously the desires of members opposite could be achieved much more quickly than otherwise would be the case. We've made some progress with regard to home care, and it is recognized as a priority under the new Health Accord. However, provinces remain on their own regarding medical costs in nursing homes. And that, Mr. Speaker, if that were to be able to change, as I indicated, we could make significant progress with respect to this issue. Even without federal support, we agree that Nova Scotia seniors should not have to pay for their medical costs in nursing homes. And we are now the first Atlantic province to begin putting a plan into action. In November of 2002, we expanded the list of seniors' assets that are protected and no longer used when calculating what seniors pay toward their care. We announced the next steps in April, and I'm going to just review those steps as we have put them forward, Mr. Speaker. The first step is contained in the current budget, and that is $8.5 million to cover the asset protections and to reduce what seniors pay. After annual cost pressures are taken into account, seniors will save an average of $4,600 per year. That is with step one, Mr. Speaker. In step two, at least another $8.5 million for a total of $17 million will be in next year's budget, reducing the seniors' contribution by an average of $12,000 per year. And the third step, the annual savings for seniors, will continue to go up each year until seniors pay room and board only. And this will cost about $34 million on an annual basis. Now, Mr. Speaker, in the event that the provincial economy improves, we may be able to afford the full bill sooner. But we have committed to get to the point where seniors only pay room and board no later than April 1st of 2007. Our plan, however, doesn't stop there, Mr. Speaker. Beginning no later than 2007, we will spend about $8 million more for a total of $42 million annually. So only income is used to calculate what seniors will pay. Married or single, none of seniors' assets will be considered. We believe this is a significant step in treating our seniors with dignity and respect. Seniors will be able to pass their lifetime belongings and assets on to their families, and their privacy will be respected. And we look at income, as we look at income only, and not pry into their financial history before they decided to enter a home. Which finally brings me to the crux of the matter. If we all agree that this is the right thing to do, then what is the issue with respect to waiting? This answer is never popular, but it reflects reality, Mr. Speaker. When you're in government, there are many demands and needs that must be met. Mr. Speaker, for instance, we want to move with respect to assisting diabetics, low-income diabetics. That is a major priority. Members speak to me with respect to home care and self-directed home care programs. That, Mr. Speaker, is a priority. So there are many, many directions out there in which we could move with respect to addressing problems. So it is an issue of establishing priorities, Mr. Speaker, and this is a priority, and as our resources become available, it is our intention to address it. Our approach in government is to tackle important priorities over time, whether it is buying much-needed medical equipment, building more schools, adding more books in our classrooms, training more nurses, paving roads or twinning highways, adding daycare seats, offering much-needed and promised tax relief, assistance to diabetics, self-directed home care programs, Mr. Speaker. The priority list is long. In all of these areas, we are responding in measured but significant steps that will make a difference to Nova Scotians without putting the province back in the red and jeopardizing our ability to pay for essential services in the future. As Health Minister, I am also responsible for providing a balanced response to the needs within the health community. This includes addressing affordability of nursing home care, as well as affordability of drugs and support for high-quality, accessible home and long-term care. Since forming government, we have provided this balance. Remember, Mr. Speaker, just 3% of seniors over 65 enter nursing homes. And of that number, government subsidizes 80%, leaving just 20% who pay for their nursing home care. As a government, we have acted first in areas that benefit 100% of seniors. Overall, we have added more than $100 million to nursing home and home care budgets. We worked hard on single entry access, moving from a system where people could pay their way into a nursing home to a system where they could buy their way into a nursing home, to a system where people who need care get care first, and a system where wait times for nursing home beds has dropped by more than 20% in 1 year alone. This year, we budgeted $10 million to freeze seniors' pharmacare premiums and cap the copay. This is part of a $34 million increase we made to the pharmacare program, compared to a $6 million reduction by the previous government. As you know, the costs of the pharmacare program will continue to grow, and we need budget flexibility to keep drugs affordable. If we all agree that seniors should pay for room and board, then why do we not do it all at once? The opposition parties say that we should put in place the plan immediately, but they haven't explained how to pay for it. They say we should immediately fix a $42 million issue, but they are suggesting that we can do it with only $25 million. We can't make things more affordable by underestimating their true cost. The reality is that getting out of the asset assessment business is expensive. However, we do believe that it is the right thing to do. We are committed to getting out of the asset assessment practice, and we are the first Atlantic province to announce a plan to do so. Yes, our plan will take time because it is expensive. The opposition may urge us to stop assessing assets immediately, but they have not explained where they would come up with the dollars needed to do that. And as I indicated, their assessment of the costs is $11.5 million short of the true figure. This has been a tough budget year for Nova Scotia. Revenues are down, and we've had some unexpected setbacks. We'll do what we can during the budget process to fund as many needs as we can, but we must also be realistic. As a responsible government, you can only do what you can afford. You can't pretend that you can afford something by underestimating its costs by $11.5 million. This is not an issue that can be fixed overnight, and care for seniors is much broader than nursing home care alone. To address this, we are beginning a broad consultation that will lead to more care options for seniors in nursing homes, homes, and communities. Our population is aging. We need to be more innovative in our programs and services so seniors have more options and can remain independent and close to their families as long as possible. The best answers are not always the immediate answers. To sum up, government sometimes, in fact often, has to say, is not able to say yes, or at least it can't say yes immediately. One of the issues of more affordable nursing home care, Mr. Speaker, is that we are the first Atlantic province to say yes to this issue. We obviously are not moving as quickly as the opposition would like, but we are investing millions of dollars to help seniors each year of our plan. And our big picture plan will not only make home care more affordable, higher quality care, and more options to support seniors at home and in their communities will be available. Now, Mr. Speaker, I didn't raise this issue early in the debate because I did not want to be perceived as taking action to stop the debate or interfere with the debate taking place in any way whatsoever. But I was curious because in my previous time in this House, it was always my impression that when legislation was brought forward that required government to spend money, or the result of that legislation would require government to spend money, that legislation could only be brought forward by members of the Executive Council. That other legislation or legislation by members who are not members of the Executive Council requiring the government to make an expenditure of money would always be ruled out of order. I'm just intrigued, and as I said, Mr. Speaker, I'm not raising the issue because I want it to be ruled upon, but I do find it interesting that we are dealing with a piece of legislation, the result of which, if passed, would require government to spend money, and that it does not follow the custom, as I had understood the custom, of such legislation only being in order when it is brought forward by members of the Executive Council in the legislature. And I believe that also to be is the state of affairs with respect to the operation of the House of Commons and the Parliament in Great Britain. And I've noticed a lot of changes in the operation of this place since I had been here previously. This is one of those many changes that I have noticed, and I'm interested to see just how all of this plays out with respect to changes and reforms of the operation of the legislature. But the fundamental principle of the legislature and the fundamental principle of Parliament is that government comes forward on behalf of Her Majesty to seek approval for expenditures, and that it is only the government that has the authority to make those requests of the Parliament, and in this case, of the legislature. We're dealing here with, as I view it, Mr. Speaker, with a piece of legislation that does, in fact, require government to to spend money if the legislation were to be passed. So I raise it not for the purpose of asking for a ruling, but I raise it out of interest because I do know that there has been considerable change, seems to have taken place. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. I'd like to recognize the Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it gives me great pleasure to rise in the House to speak on Bill number 3 before the House today. I'm encouraged to see that the former Minister of Health has stayed around for the discussion. I'm not sure whether this feels like deja vu or a bad dream, because it was he who took the brunt of the condemnation with respect to the government's position in the second last sitting of the House, as I recall it, when this was a particularly hot matter. We know that he is quite familiar with this issue, and perhaps he's here lending moral support to his colleague for being part of this discussion as well. I also want to commend the NDP for bringing this matter forward once again, and in what might be considered an uncharacteristic compliment, I think I want to recognize the NDP for all of the great work that they've done with respect to seniors and raising this particular issue. This is an issue that certainly our party identified back in June of 2002. We identified again in the fall of 2002. The NDP came forward with a more visible campaign than one that was brought forward by the Liberals. It started with a review, petitions, a broader campaign, and they certainly, in question period, brought cases before the House. The Liberal position has been clear since the fall of 2002. And I would take exception to a number of the comments that were made by the Leader of the official opposition when he rose to speak on this particular bill just a short while ago. In fact, before I commence the main part of my comments, I would like to address a number of things that he had said. The first thing that he commented on that caught my attention was that he said this was put in place by the Liberal Party in the first place. Later in his comments, he said, well, it wasn't exactly. The Liberals are apt to say that it's attributable to the Tories, but the Liberals could have changed it in the 1990s when they had an opportunity to do so. I dare say, Mr. Speaker, there's a significant difference between someone who may have put something in place and someone who chose not to make a change when they may have had an opportunity to do it. And I think it's important to review the record to recognize that in the 1989, first with the Social Assistance Act and later through other amendments, this was put forward by a Conservative government at a previous time. And through the 1990s, under the Savage government, in fact, stability was provided to long-term care facilities, increasing the standards of nursing care services, and a variety of other improvements that certainly in fiscal times could have gone, in better fiscal times could have gone better, but I think everyone recognizes the challenges that were faced by that particular government at that time. The second thing that the Leader of the Opposition was somewhat defensive about was the suggestion that, or the anticipation that I might have said that the NDP supported the tax cut. Well, I draw your attention, and I'm happy to table this if necessary, to a report from the Halifax Herald dated July 26, when referring to the tax cut in question. The Leader of the Opposition said taxes and users' fees in this province have increased, and then he goes on to say, it's time people got a break. Now, the common refrain that we hear from the Leader of the NDP when it comes to this tax arrangement is that it's a done deal. We certainly heard that throughout the entire campaign. It's a done deal, despite the fact that the Liberal caucus tabled before this House a letter from the Federal Minister of Finance saying that it's certainly not a done deal until October 15th, and beyond that, there's even a period of flexibility. I dare say, Mr. Speaker, that if the government chose, perhaps with the insistence on from the NDP side, that indeed the tax cut was premature and that indeed the issue of seniors were more important, then indeed we might have something that would be able to provide seniors with the kind of attention and dignity that is being urged upon us by the NDP in this circumstances. In addition to that, the third point that caught my attention that was raised by the Leader of the New Democrats was that he said there's no tax cut coming. And he tried to make the stretched argument that there's no tax cut coming because taxes are higher than they were back when government first came into place. They will still be higher. Well, as my memory would have it, Mr. Speaker, there was one party that said that they would end bracket creep, which actually ends the increases that happen year over year. There was only one party that said that they would put a freeze on user fees increases, and that was the Liberal Party, looking to do the responsible thing. And let's not forget that once again, we have the Center for Policy Alternatives, a body to whom the New Democrats, I think, from time to time prefer to refer, who came out with a number of studies that did an analysis on what this tax cut actually provided. They determined that for all of those people who didn't receive the $155, well, they're not going to receive a dime worth of benefits from this tax cut that's being proposed to come in place on January 1st. And for the 16,000 Nova Scotians who earn less than $10,000, well, they're going to receive only $13 apiece. And what about the 84% of the money that's going to come from this tax cut? Well, we realize that that's going to the Nova Scotians who need it least. It's hardly a better deal for working families as advertised by the New Democrats. What's missing in this debate is the question of cause and effect, Mr. Speaker. The issue of taking an action and then not following up and taking responsibility for this. Now, I want to reiterate the point that we've made throughout the last year, and that is that the Liberal Party, as a top priority, remains committed to seniors, to their dignity, ending the unfairness that has happened in long-term care facilities. This is a matter of dignity. This is a matter of fairness. This is something that is provided in other parts of Canada. And it remains a priority for us. I was interested to hear the comments from the Minister of Health, where he talked about the budget pressures that exist now and the unforeseen circumstances that bring about those budget pressures. Well, many of those, as I pointed out in question period, were foreseen circumstances. But, Mr. Speaker, I think it's important as we look at this issue to read through the whole record. And what the NDP would like to have us believe is that they've been the only people who have been speaking out on behalf of seniors in this particular matter.
Order. Order. Would the member allow a moment of time for an introduction?
Certainly.
Thank you. Recognize the member from Kings North.
Very much, and I appreciate the opportunity, honourable member. I'd like to draw your attention to two visitors who are in the East Gallery who are visiting, watching the proceedings. Gordon Williams from Greenwich, keenly interested in political activity, and Wayne Atwater, who's a councillor in Kings County who knows more about politics, who's forgotten more about politics than I'll ever learn in a lifetime. So we'd ask them both to rise and receive the warm welcome of the House.
And indeed, welcome to all our visitors in the gallery today, the Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When you make big promises to the people of Nova Scotia, it seems to me it's only fair that you find a way to say that we can afford it through this manner, or we can afford it through that manner. It's the way that we run businesses in Nova Scotia. It's the way that we run our families. When our children come to ask us for something, we often check to see whether or not the money is indeed in the bank. Mr. Speaker, when you talk about a minimum of $25 million that is going to be spent for this particular item, I think it's only the responsible thing for the party that is proposing it, and I'm saying again that this is something that we want to press for, but to provide some clear answer on how this is going to happen. Well, in the past week or so, we have spoken about, and we've heard the New Democrats speak about the important issues with respect to wait times, shortages of medical professionals. We've listened to them talk about the reduction of overtime costs. We heard them talk about the need for woodlot owners to be compensated in the wake of Hurricane Juan. Agriculture sector needs provisions because of the BSE crisis. We often hear about the fully funded tuition freeze that they talk about, technical aids for people with disabilities. The list goes on and on and on, Mr. Speaker. And at some point, somebody has to say, where's the money? Is it in the bank? And the NDP is going to say the Liberals and the Conservatives are only talking about money and we're talking about people. I can hear the echo in my ears right now. Well, before you can help people, Mr. Speaker, before you can help people, you need to have money in the bank to do it. And it's something that this particular party doesn't seem to recognize. There is a cause and effect, and it is why the Liberal Party continues to talk about the importance of ultimately living within our means. So, if we're going to talk about seniors, Mr. Speaker, as the member from Dartmouth East loves to talk about seniors, Dartmouth North, thank you. The member from Dartmouth North loves to talk about seniors, but there was a battle that went on for the last 6 months, Mr. Speaker, and it was about whether or not we could afford to support seniors. And at the whole time, the NDP sat on their hands, said, can't do anything. See no evil, speak no evil was essentially the mantra that they piped up with. And now when the October 15th deadline passes, what do they say? It's time to open up the vaults again. It's time to cut the checks. It's time to spend the monies. We care for everybody in Nova Scotia. This is about living within your means once and for all. And this party, the New Democrats, don't recognize the importance of that because at the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, this is about people. This is about people. Politics is about people. Politics is about helping people, and you can't help people unless you have money in the bank to do that.
There's real leadership now.
That's why we've made the choices that we have. They had their chance to speak out for seniors for the last 6 months, Mr. Speaker, and they sat on their hands. And now that the opportunity to speak for seniors has passed, they go on and try to speak out of both sides of their mouth.
Order, order. The Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For the past 6 months, this party has tried to be all things to all people. We don't run a government with blank checks. And we need to recognize that this is an important priority. The issue of seniors getting fairness in long-term care facilities is an important issue that needs to be taken care of at the first opportunity. It's why the Liberal Party was committed to doing this in their first year of government. But if the spring arrives and the issue of health care costs being covered for seniors is not taken care of, it will be the NDP that needs to look in the mirror and say that we didn't oppose the proper measures to ensure that we live within our means. I only need to remind the official opposition of the choices that they've made. It is not a done deal. They may choose not to read the letter that came forward from the Federal Minister of Finance that said up until October 15th, with flexibility, there was still the opportunity for us to make the right choices for seniors, for students, in classrooms, for patients. That's the priority that we're going to continue to step forward with. Mr. Speaker, governing is about making choices. It's about making choices for the people of this province. We can't pretend that the choices that we make don't have consequences. And the choices that Nova Scotians want are the consequences. The choices that they want are for the people of Nova Scotia to be provided with fairness, and that includes our seniors. That includes the most vulnerable people in our society. And we can speak about the importance of supporting those vulnerable people. But if you do not take the steps that are necessary to really live within your means, then we're going to head down the same road that they headed down in Ontario, the same road that they headed down in British Columbia with New Democratic governments, cutting checks over and over and over. You can't have it both ways. Now, the challenge has come out. The challenge has come out from the Leader of the Opposition for the Liberal Party to support these measures now that the October 15th deadline has passed, and we look forward to entering into a discussion with this government to do what's in the best interests of Nova Scotia. We will continue to press for the importance of having fairness for seniors in our long-term care facilities. But we also need to recognize, Mr. Speaker, that there are consequences for our choices. And the consequences in these circumstances may be that this government ultimately makes a choice that hurts seniors because of the choices made by this New Democratic Party in not blocking that tax cut. Thank you very much.
Recognize the honourable member for Halifax Needham.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm very pleased to be able to rise in my place to speak to Bill 3, an amendment to the Homes for Special Care Act to ensure fair treatment for seniors or for residents of nursing homes or a home for the aged or disabled. Mr. Speaker, I have in my constituency such a facility as this particular piece of legislation makes reference to. Of course, most people here will know of Northwood Manor. And Mr. Speaker, in addition to that, I certainly have a lot of constituents in my area of Halifax Needham who have followed this issue very closely. And to be frank, Mr. Speaker, I take my advice and information quite often from the people who are most directly impacted by the policies of government with respect to their health care needs. Mr. Speaker, I'm very proud to be a member of a political party whose tradition is one of having a vision, a particularly vision for health care and the provision of health care. It is this party, the party of Tommy Douglas, that believed in the importance of the socialization of the cost of health care services for people in illness and old age. And I'll remind members of this chamber that when Tommy Douglas went forward and introduced socialized medicine, medical care in the province of Saskatchewan, he was a pioneer and a groundbreaker. He did not wait for the federal government to take action. He did not wait to see what was going to happen in sister provinces. He acted on behalf of the people in his province that he represented because he knew it was the right thing to do. And I would say to the Minister of Health, who opened this debate by saying, this is not covered by the Canada Health Act, well, you know, Tommy Douglas was never held back by a federal piece of legislation from doing the right thing for the people in his province. And this is the right thing. Mr. Speaker, we can look to the province of Saskatchewan today in terms of what it is they do for their residents in homes for long-term care. We can look at what they do in home care. We can look at what they do in pharmacare. The legacy of Tommy Douglas and the vision of the New Democratic Party in that province are clear. And, Mr. Speaker, the genesis of that vision are contained in Bill 3. This is what members of this caucus have sought for the people of this province, and it's what we have been fighting for the past 2 years, and we will continue to fight for this vision until it's a reality for the people of the province of Nova Scotia. Make no mistake about that, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it's approximately a year ago today that this government made an announcement that as of November, they were making some modifications to the assessment process, the way in which the assets of seniors were taken from them and applied to the cost of long-term care. And Mr. Speaker, we welcomed those changes, but we recognized that they were quite modest changes. And the minister spoke to additional measures that the government took. I think the former minister called them small steps when she made the announcement in my constituency at Northwood Manor, where she in fact talked about the increasing in subsidies that the government were providing in terms of the per diems. And the minister today talked about how seniors, as a result of those measures, have seen on average a savings of $4,600 per year. Well, Mr. Speaker, Now let's look at this. A savings of $4,600 a year when the government is, in many cases, ripping out of the pockets of seniors, on average, $50,000 a year for the expense of being in a home for special care. We all know, Mr. Speaker, that the measures that were introduced by the government in April have basically done very little to provide relief to people who are in need of care in a long-term care facility. And moreover, Mr. Speaker, what we've been hearing is that as the government increased the subsidy, the per diem subsidy, the homes for special care have increased their per diem daily costs. So in fact, the rising cost of being in a home for special care has grown to the extent that the subsidy has practically become meaningless for people. So, Mr. Speaker, the government really needs to listen to the opposition, listen to seniors and other groups with respect to the fairness of this issue. We all recognize that this is an issue that is not fair to seniors. In my constituency, there is a wonderful retired member of the clergy, Reverend Mel Scott, who may be known to quite a few members of this constituency. And Reverend Mel, as he's called and known, was a chaplain at Northwood for many years, and he performs with the Northwood Players. And he has talked with me at some length about not just the financial implications, but of the psychological impact of the current system on seniors and their families. He talks to me about the bewilderment and the shame that people needing long-term care feel as that assessment process happens, as their resources are depleted, and the day or the week that sees them lose the last penny that they have is a week of great shame and humiliation for people in these homes for special care. And I cannot communicate with the kind of urgency that he brings to this issue when he tells me the stories from the people he has known and he has ministered to over the years in this facility as this happens. You know, the members of the Liberal Party and the Minister of Health get up and they talk about, you know, the dollars. They talk about dollars and they talk about the numbers, you know, and they do forget about the humanity that's at stake here for people. And the leader of the Liberal Party can stand there and condemn this party for talking about people all he likes. But you know what? We're not going to start because we know what is at stake here, and we are here for the people. We are here to represent the people in our constituency. And we will not back down, and we will not succumb to the politics of division that the members of that party are intent on promoting.
Order. Would the member permit an introduction? The Honourable Minister of Energy.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for ceding the floor to do this introduction. And Mr. Speaker, I would call the member's attention to your gallery this afternoon and want to introduce David Anderson, a very good friend I know of the MLA for Pictou East and municipal councillor in Pictou County. I would ask all members to recognize and ask David to rise and receive the warm welcome of the House.
The Honourable Member for Halifax Needham.
Thank you very much. So, Mr. Speaker, we in this caucus are well aware that there are many needs in our province. And we are well aware that choices have to be made. And we are prepared to stand here and say clearly and say firmly, this is a choice we would make. This is a priority, and this should be a priority for the members of this House. This is an issue of fairness for seniors and other people in this province, particularly seniors, who built this province and made it what it is today. And in their hour of need, of illness, infirmity, and old age, we as elected officials should not be turning our backs on these seniors. And if these people lived in any other province in this country outside of the Atlantic region, they would have full citizenship and have their health care covered. And we should expect no less in this province, no less in this province. Now, Mr. Speaker, I don't know where the leader of the Liberal Party gets his information, but I'll tell you right now, there's a fair amount of inadequate and unfactual information coming from this member. First of all, Mr. Speaker, I'm a member of the Canadian Centre of Policy Alternatives. I've been a member of that centre for some time. And you know, it's true, Mr. Speaker, that tax cuts are generally bad public policy. And when this government brought forward their budget with the tax cuts in the budget last year, the members of this caucus voted against those tax cuts, and the members of this caucus stood up and spoke about the problems of that proposal. However, Mr. Speaker, let's be clear. Let's situate that particular bit of public policy in the context of what's really occurred here. Mr. Speaker, this government has raised revenue into the operating budget of Nova Scotia by more than $1 billion in the first 4 years of its mandate. And Mr. Speaker, they've done that through the growth that has occurred because more people have been in the labor force and there has been an increase in GDP. But also, they've done it because of an increase in regressive taxation, and they've done it through user fees and other fees. Gambling, revenues, they've done it because of smoking, tobacco taxation. So, Mr. Speaker, the revenue that has come into this province over 4 years is $1 billion greater as a result of that. The leader of the Liberal Party stands here and he goes on about a tax cut of $130 million approximately in the face of this ballooning revenue that has been grabbed by this government. So let me tell you, and let me tell the member of the third party, that the revenue is certainly there to deal with the needs of seniors in long-term care, and it's all about choices. It's all about where they're going to direct that revenue. Mr. Speaker, with respect to the notion that the Liberal Party did not create the current situation in long-term care, I know that the member of the leader of the Liberal Party wasn't in this House under the Liberal government 5 years ago. But Mr. Speaker, I was here. And the healthcare system was in an incredible mess. The expenditures were absolutely out of control. There was no plan, not only in long-term care, but there was no plan in any aspect of the healthcare system. That government couldn't keep a deputy minister. We had, how many deputy ministers did we have? We had probably 5 or 6 deputy ministers. Well, perhaps the former Minister of Health says more than that. We had an enormous problem in our healthcare system. I remember what was happening in the long-term care system. We had a moratorium on beds. We had strikes in nursing homes from one end of this province to the other, as the workers were concerned about the need for parity, the need to be able to retain and bring staff into their sector. So we don't need lectures from the leader of the Liberal Party about the status of health care under the Liberal Party. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll recognize the Opposition House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to call resolution number 51, which I believe was called before, and so we'll continue debate on resolution number 51.
Resolution 51, recognize the Honourable Member for Pictou West.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it's a privilege for me today to have the opportunity here to speak for a few minutes on this very important issue concerning Autumn House, which is located in Amherst, Nova Scotia. And you know, Mr. Speaker, the NDP here today, we had a choice of what we were going to put on the agenda, and we looked at several different issues and said, what's more important than this particular issue at this time? 80 days, the women of Autumn House have been on the picket line, and 80 days too long. 80 days without services to the women and children and the residents of Cumberland County, and it's time for it to stop. I guess I had an opportunity to meet many of the workers, and they were introduced in our house here earlier. The 8 women of local 4326 are here with us this afternoon, and we're very pleased that they're able to stay around and listen to this debate. And I guess it seems I had the opportunity about 10 days back to also meet with them when we held a vigil and rally in the town of Amherst to show support for this cause and for the women here that have been out on strike since August the 11th. And I certainly commend them for their courage and their determination, their perseverance, really, in staying with it. And I know they've got the will within them to fight till the end is met, and they get fairness and justice, and we get services restored back to the women and children and all the residents of Cumberland County. I know we've had support here from our caucus with them. As I mentioned earlier, I was up to Cumberland County on October 18th. And I know my colleague from Halifax Needham had also met with them at an earlier point. And also this afternoon earlier we had a press conference in the Uniac room with our member from Dartmouth South, Portland Valley. So there's strong support here from the NDP caucus for these ladies that are fighting for justice and fairness in their community. And certainly, I believe government has a role here to step in now. 80 days is too long. Too long for these workers to be on strike, and too long for services to be denied to the people of Cumberland County. And I know the minister was here earlier this afternoon. He was talking with the members, I believe, in the library, and that's good. That's a first step, face-to-face discussion, and hopefully from that he'll get to know some names, he'll get to recognize faces, and be able to work towards a just solution. But you know, the whole problem here really is inadequate funding. The crux of the problem is just not enough money to fund this women's shelter, not only here in Amherst, but throughout the province. And I believe it was earlier last year in 2002 that this government cut $897,000 out of the budget for women's centers and shelters and transition homes and men's programs as well. $897,000. And that really, Mr. Speaker, has never been restored back to the programs, and it seems transition homes and men's programs and whatnot, they have to go cap in hand every quarter trying to get enough money to balance their budget. And in addition, of course, they have to fundraise themselves, and up to 25% of the money has to be found within their own community, from bake sales or art shows or whatever means they can find. But it's not right that this government is not funding these necessary programs. This fight here today is not so much about wages. It's really about benefits that are being they're taken away from them. And it's really also about ensuring that the positions will be there so that these women can provide the necessary services to their county. I understand the total number of positions is 9.3 in total, and they just want to guarantee that those will remain and that they'll be able to provide the services again to the community. I guess I'm coming from Pictou County, and I'm quite familiar there with the services that are offered in my county, but I know they're the same in Cumberland County. But Tierman House in Pictou County is a similar shelter for women, as is Autumn House. We also have the Pictou County Women's Center there, and the men's program that's provided in our county. It's called New Leaf. In Cumberland County, it's called New Directions. But they're providing important, necessary services: protection for women, protection for children, and some. I guess one thing that's rather unique about Cumberland County and Autumn House is the outreach service that's provided. The workers actually go out into the communities, into Pugwash or Parsboro, River Hebert, Spring Hill, wherever their services are needed, and meet with women and counsel them and provide advice to them around how to meet with a lawyer, or how to access a doctor, how to prepare for a court case if the case need be. So they're providing a lot of outreach services, and I understand that's rather unique in all of Canada, really, that this program is for outreach workers that go out to the community, to the homes or the community center, and meet with their clients there. Whereas many women's shelters, the client actually is coming to the home, my understanding. So it's a different approach. It seems to be working, and it's actually a model for many right across this continent that seems to be working. But at any rate, Mr. Speaker, and I'm disappointed to see the minister is not able to direct this, but the services are not being provided at this point in time in Cumberland County, and I think women and children are at risk. You just need to look at the headline that was in today's Chronicle Herald. There's an example of the services that maybe were not provided in time, and a man has been charged with murder of a young woman, and the child was there to witness what took place. And so it's that type of service, that counseling that's lost, and sometimes hopefully you can be there in time to make a difference. Obviously in this case it was in the paper, it was not, but so that's why these services are needed in Cumberland County. And for 12 weeks now, women have not had anywhere really to turn to seek the advice or knowledge that they need, or a shelter away from an abusive situation. So women and children are at risk in the communities of Cumberland County at this time. And I would call upon the minister and this government to step up to the plate and provide the adequate funding that allow this strike to be settled. Earlier this afternoon, we had a press conference, and there was a letter that was read there by one former client of the home. And she said, and I thought it was very much poignant and very to the point. And she said in her letter that was read out, Autumn House was my candle in the dark. Please don't blow out our candle. And it's important that this government take that message and provide the dollars that are necessary to continue the programs throughout Cumberland County and throughout the province, so that these programs are there and needed when women and children are at risk. So I know my time is short, Mr. Speaker, but I just want to sum up by saying that we need a government to take the the bull by the horns and settle this strike so that these 10 workers are back in the Autumn House so they can provide the services that are so necessary in Cumberland County, and that the people there will have full protection. I guess one other issue, if I got time, Mr. Speaker, is around the Board of Autumn House and the need, I guess, there for an annual general meeting of their board. It's been many months past the year when they haven't met and be accountable to the community, and I know the people of Cumberland County would like to see have an opportunity to come before an annual general meeting and express their maybe frustration over this particular issue and the loss of services at this time to the community. So I believe under the laws of the province that an annual general meeting has to be held once a year, and we're well past that 12-month period. So I would hope the government too will take the initiative to make sure that the board is meeting with their public and is held accountable to the citizens of Cumberland County. So I guess finally, Mr. Speaker, it's past time. 80 days is too long to deny needed and necessary services to the women, to the children, and to all the residents of Cumberland County. So, Mr. Minister and government, let's get this settled and provide protection to those communities.
The Honourable Minister of Economic Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, it's my privilege to rise tonight and debate the resolution. And first of all, Mr. Speaker, I think it's important to go back a little bit in time and review the beginnings of Autumn House and the situation. In the communities of Cumberland County in the late 80s and early 90s, there was a strong need for an agency of the community to be established that were concerned, as many people in the general public, myself included, on women's issues, men's treatment centers. And at that time, a number of concerned community volunteers, Mr. Speaker, myself included in that support, work with government to found the first Autumn House. Those volunteers, Mr. Speaker, were very dedicated people who were concerned about the issues of violence toward women, children, and certainly the treatment of men goes along with those particular issues. During that time, Mr. Speaker, I know on a number of occasions I helped with arranging for donations of furnishings and various other monies to be appropriated to acquire the facility and to have that facility remain a facility that was not widely known within the community, so that people who were clients had that seclusion, that trust, and that opportunity to be at a residence, a facility where they could recover and receive counseling. Through the years, the Autumn House facility grew with much more certainly expertise and counseling services, which was very important to the community and certainly important to the clients and the treatment. Through those years, Mr. Speaker, certainly more staff was acquired, and certainly the staff became, through upgrading of their own hard work and care and concern for their clients, have become a very professional staff, and certainly their hard work and efforts are felt in the communities throughout Cumberland County, whether it's in Amherst or Spring Hill or River Hibbert or Pugwash. Those facilities, those communities rely on the services of Autumn House to meet those needs and those services. As well, Mr. Speaker, the staff of Autumn House has certainly interacted well, I believe, with the various government agencies, whether it's adult protection from the province, whether it's community services, whether it's health, whether it's the justice system, the local police, the RCMP. They've established those critical relationships where this province and that community offer support that is critical for someone traumatized through a situation to be able to negotiate, navigate, and receive the type of treatment they require and the opportunity to become whole people returning into society. And I certainly know over the last several years there has been much debate provincially about what is the best model with community services for transition houses, and certainly a lot of discussion over the long-term plans and funding. But I must correct the honourable member opposite. I know he was absent from the House for 4 years, but there was no cut in the community services budget to 2 years ago to transition house. So I think it's important to point that out to the honourable member. As well, Mr. Speaker, I think it's also key to point out to the House that this government certainly believes strongly in transition houses and treatment center programs, and that belief certainly I think is carried forward for Autumn House. This province funds 9 beds, 8 full-time positions, and in the last year, Autumn House received approximately $360,000 for the transition house services from the province and $83,000 to operate the men's treatment center. Additional monies, as is the norm in any community across Nova Scotia, additional monies are raised by the community, and I'm always pleased to support those fundraisers because, Mr. Speaker, there's no question it's a vital service that is needed in our community, and one that is appropriate that the community themselves, who were the creation of Transition House and identified the need, help support as well. I would also like to point out to the House and the member opposite, Mr. Speaker, this government certainly wanted to be fair to transition house workers, and that is why earlier this year 9.3% wage increase were allocated to all approved staff across all transition houses and men's centers across the province. And this is reflective of this government, which is a very progressive government, unlike previous governments who froze wages of workers or rolled them back 3%. We bargain in good faith. We bargain on behalf of the taxpayers in Nova Scotia, but we certainly believe that that workers for the province deserve the raise, and these workers, although not employed by the province of Nova Scotia, but by the Board of Transition House in Cumberland County or the Board of Transition House in New Glasgow or Pictou, are employed by the volunteer board in the community. So, Mr. Speaker, certainly that funding was made known publicly well in advance of August the 11th, so that that board of directors, as other board of directors in the province, had dollars to offer in the form of wage increases to their staff members under the provincial formula. And I think that is a keen recognition and an important recognition, Mr. Speaker, by this government that although they are not employed by the province of Nova Scotia, these people work very hard, are very dedicated to their clients, and were deserving of a raise. So certainly the provincial formula and the portion of funding afforded by the province of Nova Scotia, that 9.3% was allocated across that operational wage component. So I think that was certainly important that that was offered to the employees in Amherst at Autumn House, as well as other employees across the province of Nova Scotia. I'd also think it's important to remember that the collective bargaining process is certainly one that my colleagues in all seats in this House strongly believe in this province. It's the backbone of labor relations between employer and employee, and with the support of conciliators and various other mechanisms when appropriate, is how resolution comes to a labor dispute. And certainly I understand in my discussions and taking forward on behalf of the employees of Autumn House that the Minister of Community Services, along with the Minister of Labour, certainly have made a conciliator available throughout this process. And it's unfortunate that a resolution has not been reached, Mr. Speaker. These people have, these employees have been off work for 12 weeks. Yes, there is a contingency plan in place, and thank goodness that no one has had to be moved out of the community, but full service cannot be supplied under contingency plan. It's a short-term situation, and certainly not a desirable long-term situation that the community of Amherst or Cumberland County wants to see in place and want to continue. The conciliator is still in place, Mr. Speaker, and certainly in my discussions with members of the workforce, when we have the occasion to speak, I urge them obviously to continue to try to work through the conciliator to negotiate an agreement so that the differences that the Board of Directors have in what their plan or their package is, and the ones that is acceptable to the workforce can be narrowed, and an agreement can be achieved so that the services are then again continued in full to the communities of Amherst, to Spring Hill, River Hibbert, Joggin, Spring Hill, Parsboro, and Pugwash, and a number of other communities that, Mr. Speaker, are served by Autumn House and the people of Cumberland County. In closing, Mr. Speaker, I want to make a few points very clear. Mr. Speaker, it's clear that these services are extremely important to the citizens of Cumberland County. Autumn House has been able to bridge that gap between services supplied by the provincial government, by the federal government, and some services that are supplied by the municipal level of government. They have become and are the advocates of change. They're the advocates for clients who find themselves in the unfortunate situation of an abusive relationship, and they help correct and mold the lives of people after such distressful circumstances occur to those people. They really and truly are the advocates of the people of Cumberland County. Mr. Speaker, I also want to strongly point out that this government was strongly aware that contracts increases were necessary, and that's why the 9.3% wage increase was made available to the Board of Autumn House, and so that there was new dollars on the table to be used in this labor dispute. Mr. Speaker, thank you very much, and I will take my chair, and thank you for the opportunity to participate in the debate.
The honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Thank you very much. Well, it certainly is a sad day to be rising and speaking on this resolution, number 51. particularly because the resolution was made originally on September 26th. We've debated it October 1st, and here we are on October 29th with the strike in its 80th day, or exactly 80 days. 80 days of hardship and stress on the women who work at Autumn House, and that is a terrible thing, but 80 days of no service in the community of Amherst. And I think that it's a real travesty that that has been allowed to languish and continue for this length of time. Certainly it was one of the first issues that came to my attention as a new MLA was the fact that the staff at Autumn House were on strike and that there was an impasse with the volunteer board. And to see that we are here at the close of this session or near close of this session of the House and that it's still continuing, I think is something that we should all be very alarmed about. And the fact that in an earlier debate, which I reviewed today, when we spoke about this on October 1st, the Minister of Community Services spoke about a contingency plan in place, that the board had done their job by providing a contingency plan. Well, what kind of plan is it that insists that women and children would travel 135 kilometers to another community, all the way to New Glasgow? If you're in crisis, if you've been beaten or abused, that's just outrageous to consider that. And we have to remember that in any location, whether you're in the city or in a rural area, transportation is a huge challenge. Transportation also, we're talking about incidents that happen often in the middle of the night or in times when there is no transportation or other help available. Distance is a challenge as well. And we're talking about a rural community where people would be traveling into this center to get the help they need in Amherst. And I think it's just absolutely outrageous that this has been allowed to continue and that the contingency plan, which is considered adequate to serve the people of Amherst, is that they travel 135 kilometers to Tierman Place in New Glasgow. So as I say, I find this an extremely sad time to be rising and speaking on this resolution. Mr. Speaker, the stress and the hardship on the strikers has been severe, and I think that it is time for leadership from the government. The government has tried to distance themselves, as the resolution says. I like the way it's been worded. It says that they're hiding behind the skirts of the Autumn House board. And really, in fact, that seems to be the case, that even up to this point, 80 days into the strike, they can still claim an arm's length distance in terms of management from the volunteer board. And many of us in this House have served on volunteer boards. We know the difficulty of trying to manage and fundraise and make ends meet. But that board has a responsibility as well. The only reason they exist is to provide the services that Autumn House is expected to provide. And if they have shut the doors and allowed this impasse to occur, and if the government has stood by and watched it, then they have failed in their duty to provide for the very reason why they're there. I mean, volunteers are there for a purpose. And I don't understand why a volunteer board would allow itself to be in this position. I understand that it's a perennial problem of underfunding. I understand that all the transition houses and many of the women's centers run deficits and have difficulty in making ends meet. And that's because we require those services to raise as much as 25 or 30, maybe even more % of their revenue in order to provide the basic services. And we know that the people who work in these centers work under a lot of stress because they're working with people in crisis. And we know that they do that for a very minimum salary. Mr. Speaker, they don't ask for high wages. They're well-qualified people. They often have many credentials and training and counseling and intervention, but they're not well paid for what they do. A lot of it is work that they do because they have a dedication and a vision and a commitment to people in need. And I think that perhaps there's even something to be said for the fact that most of them are women, and that keeps their salaries lower again. If they were a group of men on strike for this length of time, I wonder how much attention we'd be paying to that center. And if their client base were men and not women and children, I wonder if we wouldn't be paying more attention to the withdrawal of that service. So I would like the attention of the House in that regard, because I think there's something to be said here. I think a lot of the men that run our government and work in government with us should pay attention. And imagine if that service was offered to men only, and it had gone on for 80 days that the services was not available in Amherst. I think we'd be hearing a lot more about it. The reason it's silent and the reason that it tends to be lost on the agenda is because it's women and children that are the victims, and because the women are the workers in this particular center. Yeah. Thank you. That's fine. That's fine. Just to go on about the board and their role, as I say, I can't understand why they've allowed this to languish. It seems like very perverse thought that every day or every month that they remain closed, they're saving money. Well, they're going to do very well with their budget this year, but to what avail? You know, the damage and the harm that they've caused in this community is going to be far greater. So it's very perverse thinking to think that this is one way to get ahead on your budget. You know, they have to look at providing the service first and foremost. They can't close the entire center for this length of time. And this is where we come to the role of government. The role of government is to step in. If the Minister of Social Services doesn't feel it's his role, does he not think that this board has failed in its duty to provide the service that they have a contract with our government to provide? This government provides the funding. The people of Nova Scotia provide the funding, however inadequate, to run those services across the province. And in the case of Autumn House, that service is not being provided. So there's a breach of contract, in a sense, a breach of a failure to provide the service that we have provided money for. And I think at this point in time, it's fine to allow a certain period of time to hope that the parties will come together and resolve their differences. But where nothing has happened and so much time has passed, I think it's about time that the government stepped in and reassess the relationship that they have with this particular voluntary board. I think it is wonderful to allow important community services to be delivered within the community by local boards and groups. But if they're dysfunctional, or if they've come to some impasse where they can't seem to get going and deliver the service, we need to have government, and the Department of Community Services is a huge department with a large budget and many employees. I'm sure that they have the resources and the facilities and the people to intervene and go there and see that this is mediated and that the situation is resolved. I think enough time has passed already, as I have said. The government did provide, and I heard the Minister for Economic Development refer to the 9.3% wage increase that was provided. So funding was provided to increase wages. If this particular board decided to allocate the funds differently, then that again is a breach of the contract or the arrangement with the government. And I think that is a grounds in itself to go back and review the situation that you have right now. The funding is in place for the staff. I think it actually pays for 9.3 full-time equivalents, the funding that is currently in place. And yet this board has chosen to allocate it differently. They've chosen not to provide retroactive pay increases, as was the intent of government. The Minister of Community Services, I believe, gave 2% as an increase for the year 2000, 2001, and the same for the following 2 years. And yet that money is only being offered to the employees of Autumn House back retroactively to April of this year. And so I think that is, again, shows they may be trying to do the best they can in difficult circumstances, but they have not done what was expected with the money that's been provided. And yes, as has been said by other members and in the previous debate, this does show that we have a chronically underfunded social service, and that it's a very comfortable thing for the government to hive off some of these activities and allow volunteer boards and hardworking communities to pick up the need and run things like food banks and shelters. But we have to have more leadership and provide at least the basic amount of money to allow people to live and have dignity in their jobs, and also to provide the services. So we have to listen to the people who have gone on strike on August 11th and understand the situation they're in. There are a number of things I understand that the board has been trying to do in terms of changes to the work arrangement. One thing was trying to replace workers to some extent with volunteers. And I think volunteers are wonderful, and they're needed in all of these centers. And as I mentioned, in food banks and other voluntary community services. But they should supplement the professional staff that are employed in these centers. They can't take the full burden of operating. The good term is complementary service, exactly. It should be run by professionals, people with training and experience. As I mentioned, the women that come to a center like Autumn House are in crisis. Their children are in crisis. They need to have professionals who can counsel and guide them. They need to have the intervention and cooperation of police, and they need people who can take them to the police services or the health services they require and do so in a very sensitive and trained manner. That volunteers, however well-meaning, can't do that. They're not able, they're not trained, and they don't have the experience, the first-hand experience with that. So that would be unfair to the people who are in crisis. So I think what we have to do is see that as much as possible that volunteers are not used to replace frontline service providers in community services. It's just not responsible on the part of the government. And you will see some very serious repercussions if we get down that road. I'm sure we'll see more and more cases where people are left in crisis, not served, or some other, catastrophic thing will happen to people because the professionals were not available. So I would urge the government to look at that very seriously. And there's also a question of workers' compensation that I was made aware of. Apparently, the staff at Autumn House have had, rather than being covered under workers' compensation, they've had medical insurance that would provide for them in the event of some long-term disability. That was provided entirely with funds from the Autumn House board. So the employer was paying the cost of that benefit, such as it is. It is an important benefit. However, the employer was also exempted from workers' compensation payments. But now in the new arrangement, they hope to see the employees who are earning very modest incomes. They hope to transfer 50% of the cost of that medical disability insurance to these employees and thereby cut their costs and make more money available to themselves and to operate the service, I must say. But it's not fair to those employees. 1 minute. Thank you very much. What I feel should be done is that these employees, with the intervention of government, require that their benefits be maintained. They have very, very scant and slim benefits. These are not people who are covered by a host of many generous government benefits. And I think they need to preserve that. That was one of the small benefits they were able to enjoy. And as an employer, Autumn House, the board, was required to provide workers' compensation. So I would urge that the government intervene and select a mediator as soon as possible. And if that doesn't work, intervene directly and see that services are reinstated in the Amherst area. Thank you.
Thank you. I recognize the honourable member for Cape Breton Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think it's first time I rose in the House that you're in the chair, and welcome to the chair, and good luck. Well, Mr. Speaker, the first thing I want to say is I don't believe these women want to work at this House. Women like this don't want houses like this to exist, really. They would like to live in a society where women do not have to seek refuge in these types of homes. They are caring people, Mr. Speaker. They're the type of people, Mr. Speaker, that don't get into this job because it's an afterthought. They're not the type of people that are working in a home such as that because they love the environment. No, Mr. Speaker, they're working in that home because there's a need in their community to have that home. They don't wish to have their home like that in Amherst or Antigonish or Truro or Sydney. They wish our society was one that we could do without. But you know what, Mr. Speaker? It isn't such. It is so that we need these homes. And we got to start at that premise, that these are necessary. These are not, as governments would have you, kind of an ancillary thing to have in your community, that it's, oh, well, we can get by without it. It's, that these women really don't understand that the need is not there, it shouldn't be there, that it's not that great. Well, Mr. Speaker, governments are wrong. Government's got to get their priorities straight, Mr. Speaker. We've lived through almost 4.5 years of this government and its rule around how it funds, whether it's health care or community service, Mr. Speaker. And they are, Mr. Speaker, the most vulnerable people in our society. Mr. Speaker, these situations are often come to us because of the economy of an area. Now, we know that. We know we see increased crime rates and so on, and spousal abuse when it comes to the economy. So it's an overall burden of government to make sure that that is weighted out properly. That, you know, that when these things happen, when whether it's the extreme downturn in the economy or fluctuations in the economy, when these things arise, that there is a social safety net for the most vulnerable. But yet, we've seen historically, if you want to use a period of about 5 years with this government as a historical period, historically, we've had a government that's not responsive to that side of society. As I said in a previous speech, Mr. Speaker, around this government's trying to cut almost $900,000 from their budget as it related to transition houses, that same day they did that, downstairs here, with the Halifax Chamber of Commerce, the Premier was getting this big award because the province was in the black. And that night I stated to the Premier directly, I said, Mr. Premier, you care more about one bottle of black ink than one black eye on a woman, Mr. Speaker. And that's where this government comes from. There has to be compassion. To merely have a minister or the direct minister for community services say to say things that are just to make the situation go away as opposed to being directly involved. Mr. Speaker, there's complicity of wrongdoings and misdoings in this strike from just about every level of that government over there. Whether it's community services and underfunding, whether it's the minister who lives in the area for really doing nothing, or the Minister of Labour who doesn't have particularly good trade union laws to protect workers when they go out on strike. So where are we at now, Mr. Speaker? We are at a strike that's allowing the employer to strip away every other thing that they've fought for and bring them back to labor standards. The owners or the people who run Autumn House have said, okay, the collective agreement has expired, so instead of living with the terms of the agreement, we're going to take you right down to the very basic. Whatever labor standard says, that's all we're going to abide by. Is that good faith? Is that good faith? Is that what's going to take to resolve this issue? No, Mr. Speaker. I'm saying that group now is fanning the flames there. Instead of being responsible and trying to find a way to resolve this labor impasse, it has decided to fan the flames, Mr. Speaker, because we're not dealing with a group of individuals who wanted this huge raise. Quite different, Mr. Speaker. They were dealing with a group that wanted status quo. They're on the street because of takebacks of government. Mr. Speaker, where is the responsibility of government? Where are they going to, at what point does government set to itself, you know, the reality of the money that this House saves government? Whether it's in policing, by their way of intervention in education, whether it's in community service directly, by helping to feed and clothe and shelter these families. Where's the bottom line on that, Mr. Speaker? The health care costs. So, Mr. Speaker, that Amherst doesn't see a Serena Colson so tragically murdered in her apartment because they have a place to escape to know that there's a safe haven for them. Where does government lay that cost at? When they're doing their budgets, how do you cost that out? Apparently, on the social scale of things, this government has no idea of that. There is no factoring that in, no way, no how, Mr. Speaker. Why won't government do that? Well, Mr. Speaker, I would put forward a proposal that, you know, it's something that philosophically they're just not there with.
Frog and the scorpion.
You know, Mr. Speaker, they just will not own up to it that philosophically do they see the benefits of such homes. You know, Mr. Speaker, I started my conversation today, and maybe for a bit of shock value, of saying that they don't want to work there. And it's because of that, Mr. Speaker. You know, you and I both have know the great work that Transition House does in Cape Breton. And Mr. Speaker, we've been, I can't speak directly for you, but I know myself, had the ability to speak to Executive Director Beal Blanc on many occasions and had tours. And the idea, when I talked to the residents, was that it was such a warming place for their kids to get to, that these folks were fleeing violence of unimaginable sorts, Mr. Speaker. You know, we're all abhorred when we watch the news and we see tanks going into Iraq and these other places, as we should be. But, Mr. Speaker, there's just another, albeit a much smaller one, a more violent world out there that these women live in every day. And it's the violence of domestic violence, Mr. Speaker. It's the war that's raging within homes. Homes, Mr. Speaker, that we can walk by on our way home from here tonight thinking, my goodness, isn't that a lovely house? It's got the perennial little picket fence and the grass is done nice, and this time of year all the leaves are raked, and boy, oh boy, you know, isn't that the perfect little world? But none of us, Mr. Speaker, none of us know what goes on when that door is shut, Mr. Speaker, for the 20 seconds we walk by their frontage, Mr. Speaker. But I'll tell you what, those ladies in the gallery do. They know it. They know that domestic violence isn't the unemployed worker who just solely does this, Mr. Speaker. As I said earlier, that the economy has to do with it, but Mr. Speaker, domestic violence is well beyond that, Mr. Speaker. It goes beyond the socioeconomic, it goes into whether you're a lawyer, you're a doctor, whatever, Mr. Speaker. It's there. And these frontline workers see it every day. But we have a government that doesn't think that's worth paying people for. It's a government that thinks it does its duty when it says, we've spent our money on funding. We'll fund 9.3. And that's it. They don't really sit back and say, well, let's look at the real cost. Let's look at the cost of not having that industry, those workers. Let's look at the real cost of what it does to families. Because it's domino, Mr. Speaker. You know that. It goes down. It's not one woman that goes into a shelter. It's women and children. It's the breakup. It's where everyone goes after it, Mr. Speaker. And you know, Mr. Speaker, it's you and myself are fortunate enough to come from large family backgrounds where we know that, and one of the downsides of having a large family is, you know, when something goes wrong, it's like the proverbial pond. It ripples through the whole extended family and so on. And so, Mr. Speaker, when these women are called upon to intervene at Autumn House, you imagine the ripple that goes off in the community in and around Amherst, Mr. Speaker, that's caused the disruption. Yet when they're there as the safety net, they act as the calming effect on the water, Mr. Speaker, because there's somewhere to go, there's somewhere to seek refuge for these people that have violence visited upon them, Mr. Speaker. Let's talk in terms of the child who's in that system, Mr. Speaker. The child who's in that system and the cost. You know, we know the real cost may be that child's life. But let's look at the way the government looks at it. Let's look at it in the dollar and cents value of it, Mr. Speaker. We have the young person who can't get to school. You can't get to school, you can't learn, you don't get educated, you don't get a job. It's simple. It's arithmetic that even this government should have learned over its close to 5 years in government. You know, Mr. Speaker, we know that government's about making choices. So let's choose some things. Let's choose the life of that primary student or that grade 3 student that has their learning life disrupted because of violence in the home. Yet the government doesn't want to put a cost on that. The government will come by and tell you this is it. Well, Mr. Speaker, what I want to say is this, as you're wrapping me up, that this is a resolution that's come before this House that I think should be supported by everybody here, that my heart, my wishes are to the workers in this, and if the government has the gumption, it should go in and get this resolved and do it forthwith. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The time allotted for Resolution 51 has expired. I now recognize the Deputy House Leader.
So thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the House do now rise to set again tomorrow, the hours of 12 to 8, after daily routine, which will include question period. We'll entertain maybe the bill from the member from Cape Breton West. So, House, thank you.
Thank you. The motion is that the House now do rise and adjourn until tomorrow at 12 p.m. 12 to 8. All those in favor? Aye. Contrary minded? The House is adjourned.